The Ag Tribes Report is brought to you by Farm Test, a field trial design, execution, and analysis service that makes it easy to ask your fields which management practices perform best. To start your field trials, visit farmtest.ag. And Legacy Interviews, a video service that captures people as they really are, so the future knows who they really were. Listen now to a sneak peek of the short film, A Family's Legacy Interview Experience, and watch the full story at legacyinterviews.com/experience.
Listening to my dad talk about working too much or missing out on certain things, it means a lot to me.
Hearing that he regretted not being around when we were younger is not something I've ever heard.
I was watching it and I was like, whoa, okay, this is a new side of Jay that's coming out.
I can see how much excitement it brought him to share the things that he has a hard time talking about.
To be in that room with him as that's happening, kind of heartwarming that he does have that emotional side.
When you're growing up, you hear little snippets here and there, how they met, but you don't get the whole story.
It was honestly a lot more meaningful than I guess I had originally anticipated.
I think in a day-to-day conversation, you won't be provoked to answer questions like that.
I do think that's very important, to be clear and honest and say whatever needs to be said.
Welcome to the Ag Tribes Report, a breakdown of the top stories affecting the culture of agriculture, with your host, Vance Crowe. The report begins in 3, 2, 1. Let's begin.
Welcome to the Ag Tribes Report. I'm your host, Vance Crowe. Each week, I bring a co-host to represent the many perspectives of the ag tribes that collectively make up U.S. and Canadian agriculture. This week, I am joined by Jared Luhman. Jared is a cattle and crop farmer from Goodhue, Minnesota. His farm manages 230 registered Angus beef cows, marketing low-input forage-developed bulls through Faro Cattle Company. Jared also hosts the Ranching Return podcast, known probably more popularly as the Herd Quitter podcast, where he discusses farming beyond just profitability, focusing on returns to land and lifestyle. His podcast, which has been listened to over 1 million times globally, was born out of a desire to better his own operation and create sustainable, enjoyable business model. Jared, welcome to the Ag Tribes Report.
Thanks so much, Vance. I'm happy to be here.
So this week on the Ag Tribes Report, we're going to talk about how the U.S. dairy herd is getting old. We're going to talk about how the USDA underestimated the amount of demand that was out there for corn. We're also going to talk about what's going on yet again this week between the American Farm Bureau and the Illinois Farm Bureau. And if we have a little bit of time, I want to post a very interesting video on drones that I think everybody should know a little bit about. We're going to do that. Then we're going to cover Jared's Peter Thiel paradox. We're going to find out what land in his area is worth in the price of Bitcoin. And we're going to hear about his worthy adversary. We're going to do this all in just 30 minutes. So let's get going with this live stream. All right, starting off, the U.S. dairy herd is getting old. This comes from Corey Geiger in Horde's Dairyman. The U.S. dairy industry faces a potential shortage of nearly 500,000 dairy replacements, which has driven heifer sale values to record highs and prompted farmers to reduce culling, even with high beef prices. The dairy herd count was stable at 9.36 million from August 23 to October of 24. But the herd is aging due to lower culling rates. Over 65 weeks from Labor Day 2023 to before Thanksgiving of 2024, culling was reduced by 499,000 head compared to typical trends. That's a lot. Reducing culling has kept the herd numbers stable, but it's led to an older dairy population. Older dairy cows produce more milk, but also face health issues, particularly around calving. The high cost of raising replacement heifers, which is about $2,000 per head over 2 years, versus the immediate income that comes from selling crossbred beef dairy calves, which brings in about $600 to $800 per calf, might push farmers to favor the beef dairy impacting future dairy cow numbers. So, Jared, you are a cattle guy. What do you think? Does your world, when both the dairy herd and the beef herds are shrinking in numbers, what's going on to you in your herds?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I think you addressed a big part of it there, where you talked about the dairy calves, like day-old bottle calves, being $600 to $800. And I had read an article. It's been a few months now that talked about some day-old kind of bottle calves being worth even nearly $1,000, and that's a pretty big incentive to move calves pretty quick. And I think a lot of the same things are happening in beef. If you're incentivized by it, you could sell a heifer calf for $1,500 to $2,000 in the fall, or you can try and retain her to expand your herd. That's a pretty long investment, right? If a person decides right now that they want to start retaining heifers, and next fall they retain heifers instead of selling them, that's fall of 2025. They don't get bred till 2026. They don't calve till 2027. And if they're finishing them all the way out, they don't get sold till 2028. And a lot of people, I think, had a similar experience back in 2013, 14, 15, that when they decided to retain heifers and expand their herd, by the time they were actually selling a product out of them or a calf out of them, the market had come back down again, and they don't want to get stuck in that same scenario. So they're choosing to sell female or sell calves now and take that paycheck rather than, hold on, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah,
this is what I've heard from guys raising cattle, is that it's not like pigs and chickens where you can really replace the herd, the pig herd, chickens really quickly, because you can get them to lay a lot faster. Pigs produce, 12 in a litter, 13 in a litter, but cows are going to be one at a time, and it takes so long to bring them up to a maturity where you can get a good price for them. Seems like this could have really large knock-on effects for years now.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to really know, because it's odd, because yes, if people assume that if they were to retain heifers and by the time they sell something out of them, the price will be back down, then why would they retain heifers? And if we continue down that path of not retaining heifers, we'll continue to see a declining beef herd, which we have been seeing, despite the fact that, a lot of the beef herd early reductions were due to drought, and that drought is largely broken in a lot of areas. If we continue to see a decreasing beef herd, theoretically, the price shouldn't crash, and prices may even continue to get stronger. And whenever people do start to see heifers retained for breeding purposes instead of going and selling them into the feed yards, that'll reduce the cattle on feed even more, and potentially could increase cattle, fed beef prices even higher. So I don't know what the next few years look like. I don't have a crystal ball, but it'll certainly be interesting. And it's the
thing that's become probably clearest to me of all through the Ag Tribes report is that everything to do with cows, whether it's milk prices or beef prices, make no sense to me. It's so complicated. Yeah. But one of the things that I've really been wondering a lot about is, I noticed personally that when the eggs that I was using, when I would just go to the store and buy regular white eggs, when I would go to crack them, they'd smash open like they were made out of sand or something. It was not good. So I started going to pasture raised and free range, only because one of my friends in the poultry industry said, the reason that's happening is because the chickens are being kept around longer, and that's because people don't want to pay higher prices, so they're not getting rid of chickens. And the cost of that is that you're going to have shells that crack up a little easier. I have to wonder, are there downsides to keeping dairy cows around for longer? Is there milk change in its quality?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I hadn't considered those additional side effects and keeping animals around longer on the actual food component of it, and I couldn't tell you one way or another on dairy cows, but it's an interesting consideration. I don't know. Yeah, the research that I did was actually there are some positives. Older cows produce more milk, their butter fat and protein is higher than younger herd mates. But I just wonder if there is a flip side, because almost everything comes with a certain cost. Yeah. Speaking of cost, what do you think is going to happen to the price of cattle? What's going on right now? Are cattle producers doing well? Yeah. Well, I'm a cow-calf guy, and so I can't speak as much for the backgrounders and feedlots. It's kind of interesting on the backgrounding and feedlot side. Really, a lot of their profits and additional sale price, they're selling beef for higher, but that's getting bid right back into the cost of their replacements, their calves. The meat packer has to pay more for the fat cattle guy. The fat cattle guy has to pay more to the backgrounder, and the backgrounder has to pay more to the cow-calf guy. But it's a good time to be a cow-calf producer, because for the most part, we are the origin point. We own the cows. That's the factory that produces the calf. And so if we can maintain a decently steady cost of production, we can take advantage a little more of these higher prices than a lot of the other guys. Now, hopefully, with those increased prices, their margins are widening up a little more too. But there's a lot more interest costs in the more expensive calves those other portions of the industry have to pay. But yeah, I guess as far as cow-calf side, it's a good time to be in the cow-calf industry if you can keep your cost of production under control.
Well, I would definitely saw Adam Jones and Jared McDaniel, two guys, big names in the cattle industry, having a good laugh about the fact that finally the risk of being a cow-calf person is finally paying off, because it is it's a pretty rough and tumble business.
Yeah, it is. And, I always look at the University of Minnesota data and FinBin data they've got on cow-calf production. And if you look at the last 7 or 8 years, every year shows a net loss for the cow-calf producer after you consider cost of labor, interest on equity, and stuff like that. And I'm hoping 2024 shows a good positive outlook on that business, because, it's not always profitable for a lot of guys.
That is the wildest thing about farming, is that you have people that'll look at a year and say, I know the year going ahead of me, it pencils out and doesn't look good. That is a crazy thing. All right, moving on to headline number 2. Contrary to popular belief, there may be a lot less corn around the world. Speaking of Jared McDaniel, a couple of months ago, he made a prediction that turns out has come true, because the USDA has recently adjusted its projections for corn carryout, showing a significant reduction in ending stocks. According to the latest World Agriculture Supply and Demand Estimates, WASDE report, U.S. corn ending stocks were cut by 200 million bushels to 1.73 billion bushels, which is notably below market expectations to close at 2 billion bushels. This indicates a tighter supply situation, which has and could continue to push corn prices higher in the near term. Growers continue to show frustration with the USDA after continued misses with yields and carryout numbers over the past several years, notably the significantly lowering of the carryout numbers in late 2020. Corn future markets spreads have widened slightly, as well as after the report, perhaps on expectations that the farmers will need to be incentivized harder to hold bushels to compensate for higher operating interest rates. The carry trade in corn will be worth keeping an eye on. I called my friend Michael Ring to get his opinion, and he said the most fundamentally bearish news for corn long-term right now is that we may see significantly higher acres planted in 2025 as a result of decreased soybean demand after reportedly high production numbers coming out of Brazil. So you got all kinds of ideas about where the corn is going to go. The USDA doesn't give great numbers. Brazil producing lots of soybeans. Jared, are the adjusted corn predictions impacting you or raising cattle? What's your plan for next year?
Yeah. So, it's interesting how directly not that much, right? Because most of we really don't feed any grain to any of our cattle, and we sell calves, we don't finish them out on grain or anything. So directly, we don't have an increased cost of production. But, I think you kind of alluded to it earlier. A lot of things everything's kind of interconnected too, right? And so the cost of grain, people who do feed grain to cattle, even if they're further down the chain, that, cuts into their profit, and they may be able to afford to pay less for calves too. So that might impact our calf prices in some way, shape, or form, even if it directly doesn't affect our cost of production. But, and in other indirect ways too, if grain prices are lower, people may look at hay more as a more appealing alternative crop to grow, which is something we do feed. And so if there's more hay, we can buy hay cheaper. And if more corn production goes and that corn goes elsewhere, that increases the price of hay potentially, because acres were taken out of hay. And that might impact our prices. It's interesting. This year, we've been able to buy a lot of cheap and abundant hay, which has been an enjoyable thing. But if crop prices get better, who knows? Maybe that may not be the case.
Well, and that is definitely not always the case for you. Hey, I remember years when my brother was feeding out just a few cattle. Prices can go absolutely bananas. You have a couple of droughts or some big fires, or somebody has a bunch of demand in one area. All of a sudden, the price of hay can make raising cattle really expensive. Yeah,
I know. Well, the last 3 years, that's been the case. There's been a large drought everywhere, and hay is wildly expensive. And especially in an upper Midwest kind of cow-calf production system like ours, where feed is, feed is usually, even, not in just in our environment, the number one cost of a cow-calf producer, that feed cost is just huge. So anything that impacts the price of feed, even if it's not grain directly, is going to impact cow-calf producers.
Well, you plant a few acres. Does numbers like this, do you look at what's going on with the corn carry to determine what you're going to plant, or is that already in the cards for you?
Yeah, so we're lucky, being that we are a diversified operation with cows and with row crops, that we can be a little bit flexible. A lot of our crop acres have access to water and fence. And so with crop prices not looking that optimistic within the last few months, we've looked at a lot at planting a lot of those acres into some sort of an annual forage for winter grazing of our cows, because we can generate more revenue with grazing cattle on sorghum sudan grass or something than we can by planting it to corn. And also by planting it to, sorghum sudan grass, we can really build fertility in that soil. So when the price comes back, we can produce, a better crop of corn and with potentially lower costs. So we have the ability to flex our production system a little more than others. Obviously, a super large scale row crop farm can't just switch 20,000 or 5,000 acres of corn into sorghum sudan grass and bring in a bunch of cows. But on the few hundred acres we've got, we can be flexible. Now, you mentioned, if this inventory really is lower and prices are a little higher, maybe we'll shift our plans yet. We don't have seed in the ground. Maybe we'll switch back to corn or something. It's the beautiful thing of having the ability to kind of diversify and shift directions when the market calls for something.
Well, a lot going on and a lot yet to be figured out this winter. All right, moving on. Third headline: the American Farm Bureau backs down from the December 20th Illinois Farm Bureau membership removal. So I got this story from an Illinois Farm Bureau member who said, hey, the Illinois Farm Bureau was notified on Wednesday night that the American Farm Bureau won't terminate the state's membership on December 20th as originally threatened. The American Farm Bureau's board of directors approved an amended resolution that would, instead of ending the Illinois Farm Bureau's membership, it's going to push it back to 30 days after the pending litigation. If you were listening last week, you heard me say that the Illinois Farm Bureau is going to fight the removal of their membership. So they are in litigation, I believe, in McLean County, Illinois. And that's going to get brought before a judge, and it will only be after that that they will get kicked out. So if that takes a little bit of time, we'll keep an eye on that. I don't think these are huge developments, other than it's just a delay on something. What I want to get to now, any thoughts, Jared, on the Farm Bureau membership? Watching this, are you seeing it from afar?
Yeah, I've been following it largely on your podcast, but I don't have too many thoughts one way or another on it. So.
All right, well, we'll get to the final story. This is not directly related to agriculture, but I think it's something important for everybody to note. A couple of weeks ago, I played a clip by a man named Mark Andreessen, who is one of the venture capitalists from Andreessen Horowitz. He made a big splash going on to Joe Rogan's podcast, and he talked about debanking. Well, this week he was on Barry Weiss's podcast, and he's talking about drones. I want to play this clip because when I heard this, man, it really freaked me out. So let's play this clip.
There's like the next time something like that happens, God forbid, there ought to be a nationwide drone response system that's able to put an armed response, an armed AI automated response under human control, but like within seconds. I'll give you an example. So my partner Ben has funded a pilot program in Las Vegas. The Las Vegas PD now has the ability to put an unarmed drone with a high-resolution camera on site at any at the location of any 911 call, any burglary alarm, or any gunshot. In Las Vegas, they're able to put a drone on site in 90 seconds.
Wow.
Right, and that has two consequences. Number one, if something goes wrong, if there's a break-in or whatever, there's something happening, a carjacking or whatever. Number one, you're gonna have instant response. You're gonna be able to see it. By the way, the drone can then follow the perpetrator, right? So the guy drives away, the drone follows, right? So you can't get away from these things. And then that means that the police officers are not at danger when they go in blind because they don't know what's happening, right? And when police encounters go bad and somebody gets shot and killed, a lot of it is because you have a live police officer under stress in a situation that's unclear where they don't know what they're going into and something goes wrong.
All right, Jared, before I interject interject my own opinion on this. What do you think about AI-controlled drones going into cities to respond to gunshots?
I was hoping you would give your perspective before you ask for mine. No, it's interesting. I mean, I can see advantages of it in that quick response and things happen real fast. You know, a lot of times first responders can't get there quickly. So I obviously can see advantages of that. It's a little crazy that there's access to, I don't know. Yeah, who knows where that goes? But yeah, what do you think on it?
Oh, my response is hell no. This is like the absolute power I do not want local law enforcement to have. I think that it has the potential to be civilization ending. I think this is where you have Orwell surveillance state that can be taken to a whole nother level. And I realize that drones are a reality. They're a reality on the battlefield. We're seeing that there's, reports of drones off the coast of New Jersey, all of this. But local law enforcement, one, having drones that can surveil and chase people is no good. Imagine COVID, where they say, well, we can't post a police officer here. We're just going to post drones up here and then follow you around if you're leaving your house and you're not supposed to. And then two, ultimately, drones have the potential to be incredibly lethal. And if somebody were to get in control of a fleet of drones within the United States, this is incredibly dangerous. So I am absolutely, totally against this. And for all the good things that drones bring, I am so against this that I would give up many, many of the positives that come with drones.
Sure. That's fair. I can see that, but it's often like any tool, right? That within, any tool can be used in a poor way as well. So I can see advantages of it, certainly, but the way you described it sounds pretty horrible. I have no interest in a surveillance state where I can't do anything without fear of being watched, by somebody else. But
yeah, I mean, like I have these visions of, like being attacked by like birds, right? Where it's like a warrior from above and there's nothing you can do and you have to hide out. And I know my friends have kind of made fun of me about this, but it is a very real possibility. And drones, they're a dangerous force. I think they are as dangerous as nuclear war.
Yeah. And I guess where I can see an advantage, like they talk about in abduction, if a person runs and takes off with a kid and the parent calls right away to the emergency response and says, hey, this car is driving away from right here, and they can be there right away and see it, where a police car, that person could be out of the county before somebody actually gets there. I can see it's all with intention that things could be used well, but I agree. I have no intention or a desire for it to be used in the manner that you described. That's pretty scary stuff.
All right. Thanks for entertaining this. I feel very strongly about this, and I wanted to interject it on the Ag Tribes Report. If you have news that you think we should be covering on the Ag Tribes Report, hit me up on X at Vance Crowe. Now, moving on to the Bitcoin land price report. Jared, what county do you live in, and what's an acre of land going for in terms of U.S. dollars?
Yeah. So I'm in Goodhue County, Minnesota, and I've seen poorer land for $10,000, but good land, I would say, in that $12,000 to $13,000 range is what I've been hearing. If it comes for sale, doesn't seem like it happens too often.
That's an interesting thing. I've been reading about that. You and I shared some stories back and forth this week about how land isn't coming up, and then when it does, there's some no sales that are happening where people aren't getting the price they expect. Yeah. Well, if we were going to keep this going on Bitcoin, last week, the Bitcoin price for one Bitcoin was $96,900. This week, as of press time, it was $101,500. So if we were to take the average of your high quality land, that'd be $12,500 per acre. That means you could get 1 acre for 0.123 Bitcoin per acre, or 1 Bitcoin would buy you 8.1 acres of farmland in Goodhue County. Jared, how does that strike you?
It strikes me as crazy. Well, it's wild to me. And I know, I'm one of those guys probably who don't fully understand the purpose of Bitcoin. I prefer, I see value in assets, land, production of food and resources and housing and real estate production, or, the generation of homes and, shelter and whatnot. And then there's Bitcoin. And it's crazy to me that this virtual coin can be worth so much compared to land, but it's interesting. Yeah, it's been wild to hear people selling, however many Bitcoins for a box of pizza, and now you can buy how many acres with 1 Bitcoin. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something to be said for you commodity guys, particularly beef guys, saying like, look, I want my value stored in something that I can feel and touch and have. And that seems to make a lot of sense to you guys because that's what you're doing. And I think it's very interesting. This week, there are 4 states that have proposed that they were going to have their own strategic reserve of Bitcoin. And I think they're trying to do their best to front run what looks like the Trump administration might actually have a strategic reserve of Bitcoin. We'll see where that goes, but I would anticipate that if the U.S. says they're going to hold Bitcoin and try and accumulate more, that price will go up because they're not making any more Bitcoin. There's only the ones out there that are there.
It sounds familiar, what people say about land.
I couldn't agree more. But I digress. We've got to keep going if we're going to keep time. Now on to the Peter Thiel paradox. This is where I'm going to ask Jared, what is one thing that you believe that almost nobody you know agrees with you on?
Yeah. So in my geographical region here in southeast Minnesota, we've got a lot of row crop land and there is a lot of pasture land, but most people look at grazing and the grazing business as a business for the land that you can't farm. You know, row crops, corn, soybeans comes first. And so I guess my paradox there would be that I believe that there is potential for grazing to be a strong and solid and profitable enterprise on productive tillable row crop land. And I know there's a lot of people who look at us putting really good ground into pasture and thinking we're insane, but I've seen some people produce some pretty darn good profits in that kind of a production model. So there's my thought.
I think this is a good one because in the people that are out there buying land, I mean, they really are putting their money where their mouth is. When they buy it, they plan to put it in row crops. Mm-hmm. Tell me, do you think you can make it more profitable than growing row crops?
Well, it comes down to the year because this year I would say we sure could. When it was 2 or 3 years ago and corn was $7-8 a bushel, probably not. That's pretty hard to compete with just about anything. But on an average year in, year out basis over the long haul, I think we can be profitable on row crop land. And, you know, that to me, a lot of times that seems more appealing to me than the really volatile row crop where it seems like, I hear people talk about really good for 3 years, really bad for 3 years, and hope to break even for 4 years or whatever that is, or something like that. And if you can produce a nice steady profit on a production model of grazing, and I think it's interesting. A lot of people look at grazing as maybe just this like almost hippie or grass and soil and ecological movement. I just see grazing as a solid, awesome business model that also is very enjoyable and has a lot of ecological benefits.
Well, Jared, I am going to give you a 9.2 on this one. I think that this earns a really good price because everybody else around you is taking their money and they're putting it into row crops, and you are putting your money into doing this. And so I think like a man that puts his money where his mouth is deserves a high score. So congratulations, that maybe the highest score we've ever given on the Peter Thiel paradox. All right, let's move to the final segment, the worthy adversaries. This is where we try and get out of our ideological echo chambers. A lot of times on X, we only talk with the people that agree with us, or if we argue with people, it devolves into name calling and stuff that doesn't really help. So it's always good to think about who is someone that you respect, but you totally disagree with.
Yeah. So I'm going outside of agriculture a little bit on this one. And the person that came to my mind I really struggled with was Grant Cardone. He's very vocal in social media on real estate. And there was one clip that went around of him saying, if you don't make $400,000, you should be embarrassed. And, I cannot get behind that mindset where you got to have more, 10x everything, be bigger, be better. But on the other hand, as far as the respect side, that guy has built some incredible businesses. He has helped a ton of people, taught a ton of people. So you got to respect what he's done. But I pretty strongly disagree with him on a lot of those perspectives of more, and growth and productivity above all else. So,
in my lifetime, I've met maybe 3 people that really remind me of Grant Cardone. They are full of energy. Yeah. They believe that they can do anything. And they are, when they're up, they're way, way up. And if they're down, they are way, way down. And they've got those kind of magnetic personalities that seem to allow the world to just kind of well, they call it the reality distortion field around them, right? Like where reality doesn't seem to touch them.
Right.
And I'm with you. Like you have to respect a person that's at least seemingly delivered on the financial gains that they have, but I strongly disagree with him as well. If you want to see a list of worthy adversaries, you can go to my X profile every week. I add those new people on there. And Jared, we will get Grant Cardone on there. All right, we are wrapping up in time. Jared, just for a little bit, tell people about your podcast. If they tune in, what can they expect to hear on your show?
Yeah, thanks for that. The Ranching Returns podcast, I talk to farmers and ranchers, primarily grazing-based livestock enterprises, people who are profitable, some of them even on row crop land, making a go of it in that business. And we talk about, how we can improve our lifestyles, how we can improve the land, and how we can improve profitability. And it's a lot of fun. So yeah, if you're interested in any of that stuff, feel free to tune in, Ranching Returns podcast.
Well, I have to say, one of the reasons I reached out to you, Jared, was because I like the way you engage with people on X. You posed a super simple question the other day, and I can't remember even what it was, but I was like, hey, that stimulated a great conversation. I really love it. He's a great follow. It's at JARLUH, Jarla. And it's a great follow on X. So, Jared, thank you so much for coming on the Ag Tribes Report.
Thanks, Vance. Really appreciate it.
All right, so we are going to wrap the show up. I want to give a big shout out to farmtest.ag. If you want to find out if the systems you're using on your fields, whether it's crop protection or seeds, are producing the results that the marketing manager said that they were, you can use farmtest.ag to lay out plots, set up a test, and run it. It is run by Nick Cizik, who I did a podcast with a few months ago. It is an extraordinary company. I recommend going and checking it out. Also, Legacy Interviews. This is where I sit down to record the life stories of your loved ones so that future generations can see that spark, see who they are, who they were, and record those stories so they know their family history. If you've been thinking about giving this as a Christmas gift, and we have been busy wall to wall these last few weeks getting people purchased, getting people's interviews recorded, getting them sent off. It has been crazy busy, but if you want to give this as a Christmas gift, definitely have a meeting with me before December 16th so we can get that gift package out to you so you have something to give your loved one for Christmas. You can learn more at legacyinterviews.com/experience, and there you can watch that full video of the family watching their legacy interview. All right, we will be back next week where Joe Valaklavic is going to come on the podcast and share his insights from the tribe that he represents. So until then, I, as always, feel free to disagree.